Pam pam para para pa 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 para 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 pam para da 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 para Welcome back, fellow listener. We are again here with the first novel ever written of Dungeons and Dragons in the world of Grey Oak or Oert, any way you want to call it. We're here to read the last 4 chapters of Quag Keep. Last time we read chapter 13 and 14. Our 7 heroes, our party of 7 heroes, the swordsman Milo Yegon, the wereboar berserker Nail Fangtooth, and his companion Afrita, a pseudo-dragon, a rogue elf Ingrig, a sword maiden, a human sword maiden Ivili, a cleric Divdine, a bard Wymark, and the lizardman Guild. Our company are traveling across the Sea of Dust, a particular location in the world of Earth, where the sea is made of dust. Then they fight a horde of undead. They call it Lychee, but they are not our common Dungeons & Dragons lich. They are Lychee skeleton warrior. After that, the berserker was called by a mysterious mind calling, and the group follow him, and they fight with a very big dragon by the name of Rockna the Brazen. After that, there is no rest for our heroes, because a sandstorm approaching, a dust storm, more precisely, a dust storm approach. So they prepare to breach it. Here we are, chapter 15, Singing Shadow. A sip of water, as always. Okay. Milo stirred. A weight pinned him to the ground. Sometime during the force of the storm he had lost consciousness. Even now his thoughts were sluggish, blurred. Storm? There had been a storm. His shoulder rasped against something solid, and his nose was clogged not only with the ever-present dust, but also with a stench so evil that he gagged, spat, and gagged again. Gagged, not gagged, gagged. To get away from that, yes, that was what he must do. It was dark as if the dust had sealed his eyes. He forced his hands into the soft powder under him, strove to find some firm purchase there to enable him to heave himself up, to shake the burden from his back. There was no such solid surface, none but the wall scraping at his shoulder. Now he flung out an arm and used it to push himself up and away. Dust showered down as he wavered to his feet, steadying himself by holding onto the rogue barrier he had found. At least he was upright, looking up and out into night. Night? Milo shook his head, sending more powdery stuff flying outward in a mist. It was difficult to marshal coherent thought. Some stealthy wizardry had claimed him, freezing not his clumsy body, but his mind into immobility. But Milo's head turned. He had heard that. He edged around so death, though the barrier against which he had sheltered still half supported him. It was now at his back. On his wrist there was movement. Still, deep in the daze which nullified even his basic sense of danger, he saw the dice flicker alive, begin to turn. There was something he must do when that happened. Only he could not think straight. Not now, for from the waste of dunes came that other sound, sweet, low, utterly beguiling. The song of a harp in the hands of a master? No, rather a voice that shaped no words, only thrilled, cold, promised. Milo frowned down at the bracelet. If he could only think what it was he should do here and now, then his arm fell to his side, for that thrilling sound soothed all his awakening anxieties, pulled him. The swordsman moved forward toward the hidden source of that call. He sank nearly to his knees in the dust drifts, floundered and fought, dust shoes near forgotten, until he strove impatiently to lash them on. The need to find this singer who used no words moved him onward, as if he were drawn by a chain of bondage. Fighting against the insidious pull of the dust, he rounded the base of a dune. Moonlight sent strange shadows across his way. The night was bitterly cold, but there was no wind, and the dust disturbed by his floundering efforts fell quickly back again. There was light, not moonlight, but a stronger gleam. Though it did not have the warmth of a torch or the steady beam of a lantern. Right here, Milo came to a stop. She stood with her back to him, her hands upheld to the moon itself. Between those hands swung a disc on a chain, a disc that made the second moon, a miniature of the one above her. Yveli. No helmet covered her head now, nor was her hair netted tight. Instead, it flowed about her like a cloak. The pallid light of her moon pendant took away the warmth of color that was in her hair by day, gave to all of her silvery overcast. She had used the spell of immobility. What other sorcery could she lay tongue and hand to? There were woman's secrets that even the wizards could not fathom. Milo had heard tell of them. He shook his head as if to loosen a pall of dust from his mind, as he had in part from his body. Woman magic, cold, moon magic. All men knew that woman had a tie with the moon, which was knit into their bodies. What she brought here might be as alien to him as the thoughts and desires of a dragon or a lychee. If the dead alive had thoughts and not just hungers and the will of chaos to animate them. Yet Milo could not turn away, for still that thrilling entice drew him. Then she spoke. Though she did not turn her head to see who stood there, it was as if she had knowledge of him, perhaps because she had sent this sorcery to draw him. That sudden thought, he discovered, held a strange new warmth. So you heard me, then, Milo? There was none of the usual crisp note in her voice, rather a gentleness, a greeting subtle and compelling as a chant. Chant? His nostrils expanded. The foul odor of the dead dragon was gone. He might have stood in a spring-greened meadow where flower and herb flourished to give this sweetness to the air. I heard. His answer was hardly more than a whisper. There worked in him now emotions he could not understand. Soldiers' women he knew, for he had the same appetite as any man. But Yveli, took me like unto his own waited upon her, blurred the curves of her body. Yveli was not like any woman he had stretched out hand to before. Now his right hand did rise, without any conscious effort on his part, reaching toward Heavily, though she still did not turn to look at him. The cold light caught on the bracelet he wore with a flicker. It might have been that one of the dice had made a turn of which he was not aware. But the thought hardly touched his mind before she spoke again, driving it fully from him. "We have powers, Milo, we who follow the homemade lady of the sword and shield. It is sent to us from time to time, the forelooking. Now it has come to me, and this forelooking tells me that our lives are being woven into a single cord, both of us, into a single cord, both of us being the stronger for that uniting. Also, now at last she did move, and he saw clearly her features, which were as solemn and set as might be those of a priestess intoning an oracle from a shrine. Also we have in truth a duty laid upon us. Her straight gaze caught and held his eyes, and there appeared a dazzle between them. He raised higher the hand he had put out to her, to shade his eyes from that bemusing sparkle of light. But it was gone in an instant. Then he asked dully, "That duty being?" "We are to be the four of the company, because we are in truth meant to be one. Strength added to strength shall march in the van. Do you not believe me, Milo?" Again the dazzle sprang between them. His thoughts fell into an ordered pattern, so he marveled that he had not realized this all long ago. Evilly spoke the truth. They were the ordained spirit of the company. "Do you not understand?" She took one step, a second, toward him. "Each of us has a different talent. Welded together we make a weapon. Now is the time that you and I, swordsmen, must play our own role." Where and how? A faint uneasiness stirred in him, but Evelie before him was not source of that uneasiness. She could not be. Was it not exactly as she had said? They were each but a part. Together they were a whole. "That it has been given me to see in the foreknowledge." Her voice rang with confidence. "We march. There." The hand still holding the moon disk swept out, away, and the disk appeared to blaze, giving a higher burst of cold light to her pointing fingers. "See?" Now the stern quality left her voice. In its place was an eagerness. They might be fronting an adventure in the safe outcome of which she had full assurance. "I have brought the dust shows. The moon is high, and the light full. Also the storm is past. We have the night before us." She stopped to gee up. The crude shows he knew well. Then her fingers touched lightly on Milo's wrist, below the band of the bracelet. Though she looked so cold in this light, yet a warmth spread upward along his arm from that kindest of touches. Her eyes held his again, commanding, assured. Of course she was right, but where? He repeated part of his question. "To what we seek, Milo? No, you need no longer depend upon that ring of yours with its near-forgotten map. The lady has given full answer to my pleas. See you." She whirled the mullet disc at the length of a chain, letting it fly free. It did not fall, to sink and be hidden in the dust. Rather, there was another dazzle of light, and Milo blinked, for in its place a spot of light hovered in the air at the level of Evelie's eyes. "Moon magic," she loathed. "To each his own, Milo. I do no more than any who has some spell training can do. This is a small thing of power. It will be drawn to any source of power that is not known to us, or that is alien to our understanding. Thus it can lead us to that which we seek. He grunted and went to one knee to tighten the lashings of the sand shoes. Magic was chancy. He was no spell user, but neither he was certain could any agent of chaos have marched with them undiscovered since they had left Grey Oak. Divine, in Greek, both would have known, caught the taint of evil at their first meeting with Evely. The others he half questioned as he arose again. She had moved a little away, and there was a shade of impatience on her face. Though she now bore her helmet in the crook of one arm, she made no attempt to renet her hair and place it on her head. They will come, but no night is without a dawn, and our guide can only show its merit by the moon under whose blessing it was fashioned. We must move on now. The disk of light quivered in the air. As the girl took a step forward, it floated on, always keeping at the same distance from the ground and ahead. One range of dunes was like unto another. Twice strove to check their way. Twice time strove to check their way with those lines upon his ring, but the veins in the stone were invisible in this light, which gathered more brightly around Evely. She had begun that thrilling again, so that all he had known before this time now seemed as dim as the setting of his strange ring. Sometimes I stop because there are typos in the ebook, so I have to figure out what because I can read typos. So there was no change in the sea of dust. Dunes arose, and jealous might the waves of a real sea. Looking back once, Milo could not even sight any trail that they left, for the powder straightway fell in upon and blurred any track. In fact, he could not even tell now in which direction lay the body of the dragon, and those others who had marched with them. This troubled him dimly, from time to time. When such inner uneasiness awoke in him, Evely's soft thrilling struck a new note, drawing him back from even the far edge of questioning what they did or were they to do. Time lost meaning. Milo felt that he walked in a dream, slowly, his feet engulfed by a web that strove to entangle him. Still that disk floated ahead. Evely sang without words, and the moon gave cold light to her floating, unbound hair, the carven features of her face. It was chance that brought a break in the web that enmeshed Milo, or was there such a thing as chance? He sometimes wondered afterwards. Did not the priest of Om advance the belief that all action in the world, no matter how small or insignificant, had its part in the making of a pattern determined upon by powers men could not even begin to fathom with their earth-tied senses? The fastening on one dust show loosened, and he knelt again to make it fast. As he pulled on the lacing, his left hand was uppermost. The dual dust clothed the setting of his second ring, but though it was indeed filmed with dust, it was no longer dull. Milo wiped it quickly across the edge of his circuit, for glancing at it alerted that uneasiness in him. No, it was no longer dull grey. Without any spark of light, something moved within it. Raising his hand against his breast, Milo peered more closely at what shafting within it. What? Milo! Evely had returned, was standing over him. Again, was it some hidden impulse of his own, or was he only the tool or player of some other power? He put the hand wearing the ring up and out. His grip closed about her wrist. The dual stone was indeed alive. In its depths there stood a figure. Tiny as it was, it showed every detail clearly. A woman, yes, very much a woman, well endowed by nature, but not Evely. Under the fingers that imprisoned her wrist there was no hardness of mail, no wiry arm strengthened by sword exercise to a muscularity near his own. Milo, still keeping that hold, faced the whom he so held. No, Evely, no. The hair that floated around her was as silver as the moonlight. In her marble white face the eyes slanted, held a small greenish spark. Her jaws sharpened, feigned to form a mask that held beauty, yes, but also more than a touch of the alien. Now her mouth opened a trifle to show sharp points of teeth, such as might be the weapons of some beast of prey. That change in her jerked Milo free from the spell which had held him. He was on his feet, but he did not lose his hold on her. Save for a first involuntary pull against his strength, she too stood quiet. "Who are you?" For a moment she stared at him, her slanted eyes narrowing. There was on her face a shadow of surprise. Her lips moved. "Evely." Illusionist, his newly awakened mind, freed from the spell she could so easily wave about the unwary, gave him the true answer. He did not need to hear the truth from her. He already knew. Now he spoke it aloud. "Illusionist, did you so entice the berserker?" Entice. The berserker? They had been too occupied with danger to question Nail before the coming of the storm. But Milo believed that he now saw the answer to the other's desertion of their party. She tried to fling off his grasp, her face more and more alien, as her features formed a mask of rage. But Milo held her tight, as the once cloudy gem blazed, while the disc that had spun through the air whirled and dove for his face like a vicious insect. He flung up his other hand to ward it off. It dodged its defense easily, as might a living creature swooped and flattened itself against his skin above the wrist of the hand that gripped its mistress. Milo cried out. The pain from that contact was as intense as any burn. In spite of himself, his hold loosened. The woman gave a sinuous twist of her arm and her body broke free. Now she laughed. For a moment he saw her waver, become Evely, but the folly of keeping up such a broken cover of deceit was plain. Instead she turned from him, kicking off the clumsy sand shoes. She was mistress of more than one form of magic, for she skimmed across the surface of the dust apparently as weightless as the wind, not even erasing in her passage the uppermost film of the sea. Above and around her whirled the moon disk, moving so swiftly that its very radiance wove a kind of netting for her defense. Useless though pursuit might now be, Milo followed doggedly after. Doggedly. He had no way, he was sure, to return to the party by the dragon. If there was any hope to win free of the sea, it might be to trail his beguiler. She rounded the dune and was lost to his sight. Then he came to the point where she had disappeared. When he reached it, he saw that flicker of light now so well ahead that he had no hope of catching up. However, now it kept to a straight line, for the dunes fell away and the surface of the sea of dust was as level as it had been in that place where they had found Nail battling with the dragon. There was something else. The light flickered, dipped, spun from the dull grey of the sea into what stretched not too far ahead, a mass of darkness rising unevenly. The cat. Unevenly. Vieni. Sorry. The blotch of that shadow swallowed up even the moonlight. Milo paused, his head up, his nostrils testing the smells of the night. He lacked the keen sense of the elf and the berserker, but he could give name to what he smelled now, the rank odor of a swampland. Yet to find this in the ever-abiding aridity of the sea of dust was such a strange thing, it instantly warned him against reckless approach. The swampland was no barrier for her, whom he followed. The light spun on out, wan and pale, into the embrace of the darkness, drew even more rapidly ahead. Milo's dust shoes beat a path for him to the edge of the shadow. He caught a diminished glimmer of what might be a stretch of water. He could smell the fatty odor of the place. My cat demands attention. A second. I return in list. Okay, here we are. Sorry for the waiting. Okay. He caught a diminished glimmer of what might be a stretch of water. He could smell the fetid odor of the place. For the rest, it was only darkness and menace. To follow out into that would be to entrap himself without any profit. But that he had reached the place they had been seeking, the place of which leeches had told them, Milo had no doubts. Somewhere out in that quagmire, which defied all natural law by its very being, lay the fortress of the enemy. What if he had remained in the illusionist spell? Would she have left him immured in some bog, as treacherous as the dust, to be swallowed up? He looked down at the ring that had given him the warning. There was no light there now. The stone was once more dull and dead. Milo wheeled slowly to look back, careful of how he placed his feet. There was no returning. He had no idea how long he must wait for dawn, nor how he might reach the others, draw them hither to face the next obstacle in their quest. Using the dust shoes as a supporting platform, he hunkered down, his gaze sweeping back and forth along the edge of the swampland. There was growth there. He could trace it in the moonlit humps of vegetation. There was life also, for it started once and nearly spun off into the dust, as the sound of shrill and loud croaking made him think. With a shiver he could not entirely subdue, of that horror tale told about the temple of the frog and the unnatural creature bred and nurtured therein to deliver the death stroke against any who invaded that hidden land, that too occupied the heart of a swamp, holding secrets no man of the outer world could more than guess. The line between the sea of dust and this other territory ran as straight as a sword's point might have drawn it. None of the vegetation or muck advanced outward, no point of dust ran inward. That line of division was too perfect to be anything but artificial. Milo, understanding that, fingered his word hilt. Wizardry, yet not even the wizardry he knew of, if Istaspes had been right. A wizardry not of this world, and it was hard enough for a fighting man to withstand what was native. He had no spells except... Milo stretched out his right wrist. Moonshine could not bring to life the dice. He struggled to remember. They had turned on one head as he had followed the enticement of the illusionist into the night. Then he had been so under a spell that he had not been able to influence the turning. He advanced his other hand, flattened down the tomb to inspect the once more dead stone ring. Patting it beside the other with the map, he could not see where had he gained those rings. The swordsman fought to conquer memory, seek those passages in his mind that were blocked. There was a flash of a mental picture, here and gone and in almost the same instant. Sitting at a table. Also he held a small object, carved, shaped, the image of a man that was of some vast importance to him. He must struggle to bring the memory back, to retain it long enough to learn. He must. Something flashed out of the air, hung before him. Moonlight glittered on it, but it was no disk. It hissed, shot out a spear tongue, as if to make sure of his full attention. Memory was lost. Afrita, the pseudo-dragon, hissed, as banefully as had her greater cousin, but speaking of her name might have been an order. As speedily as she had come to him, she sped off through the night, so the others now had their guide. In so little was Milo's distrust of the future lift. He tried once more to capture the memory, thinking back patiently along the lines he had followed. He had looked at the bracelet, his rings before that had been the call that had made him remember the Temple of the Frog. He slowly shook his head. Something in his hand, not the rings, not the bracelet that tied him to this whole venture. He thought of the chain with Istaspes. What the wizard had said of an alien who had brought him, and the others, here to tie. Tie what? Milo groped vainly for a clue. What lay away, hidden in the unnatural swamp, was of the highest danger. They were the ill-assorted hunting party sent to ferret out and destroy it. Why? Because there was a guise laid on them. Men did strange things to serve wizards, whether they would or not. It was not of chaos, that much he knew. For a swordsman could not be twisted and bent into the service of evil. But this tied him. He pounded his wrist against his knee in rising anger. It was a slave fetter on him, and he was no man to take meekly to slavery. His anger was hot. It felt good. In the past he had used anger to provide him with another weapon, for controlled as he had learned to control it, that emotion gave a man added strength. Before him lay something that sought to make him a slave, and he was voices. He got to his feet, hand once more seeking his sword hilt. Now he faced the swells of the dunes. From between them figures moved. More illusions? Milo consulted the ring. It did not come to life. As yet he had no idea of the range of that warning. He continued to hold his stamped out where he could glance from the setting to those drowning near at the pace dictated by the dust shoes. Though he could not see most of their faces because of the overhang of helmets or cloak hoods, he knew them well enough to recognize that they had the appearance of those with whom he campaigned. Still he watched the ring. Hola! Nail's deep call, the upflung arm of the berserker, was in greeting. He led the party, Afrita winging about his head. But close behind him trod a smaller figure, helmeted head high. It was toward her that Milo now pointed the ring. There was no change in the set. Still, he could not be sure, not until perhaps he laid a hand on her, as he had on the singer out of the night. Wymark drew close to her as if he sensed Milo's suspicion. There was the smell of magic, the bard said. What led you on, swordsman? The dark figure of Nail interrupted. I said it, songsmith. He followed someone he knew, even as did I. That damn wizardry made me See a brave comrade dead in the herd these 3 years or more. Is that not so, swordsman? I follow one, with the seeming of Iveli. He took 3 steps forward with purpose, reached out to touch her. No blades, this was Iveli. The battle-maid drew back. Lay no hands on me, swordsman. Her voice was harsh, thus fretted, with none of the soft warmth that the other had held. What do you say of me? Not you, I have proved it. Swiftly then he explained the threat that an illusionist could evoke they all already knew. Perhaps deep down guilt, no one could be sure of any alien's reaction to most magic that enmeshed the humankind, or in Greek might have withstood that beguilement, but he was sure that the rest could not. Illusionist, the cleric faced the dark swamp. Yet you were led here, to what we have sought. A swamp, Nail commented. If they sink us not in dust, perhaps they will sow us in mud and slime. Such land as that is a trap. You were well out of that, swordsman. It would seem those trinkets you picked up somewhere are near as good as cold steel upon occasion. He was answered by one of those croaking cries from the swamp, but guilt, who had trudged waveringly at the end of their party, gave now a hissing grunt that drowned out the end of that scratch. Throwing aside his dust-stiffened cloak, the lizard man headed straight for the murky dark of what Nahil had so rightfully named trap. End of chapter 15. Wait a second. Okay. Sorry for the waiting. So, a sip of water and then we continue with chapter 16. Now we understand why the novel is called Quag Keep. It makes sense. Now, chapter 16, Into the Quagmire. Dawn came reluctantly, as if the sky must be forced into illuminating this strangely divided land. Now they could see color in that mass of vegetation, rank, sickly greens, browns, yellows. Here and there stood a twisted and misshapen rise of shrub, some species of water-loving growth, maimed in its growing by the poisoned earth and muck in which it was rooted. There were reeds, tangles of bulbous, splotched plants among them. Dividing each ragged clump of such from another lay pools, scum-covered or pit-dark brown, to the surface of which rose bubbles that broke, releasing nauseating breaths of gas from unseen rot. Some of these pools, in the further distance, achieved the size of ponds, and one might even be considered a lake. In these larger expanses of water there spread paths of water growth, root anchored below. There was a constant flickering of life, for things squatted on those paths or hid among the reeds and shrubs darting forth to hunt. Above insects buzzed some so large as to be considered monsters of their species. Yet the line of demarcation between dust and quag must form an invisible wall, for the life of the swamp never, even when being pierced or hunting, came across it. The line between dust and quag was no physical barrier. However, for guilt had no trouble in entering the water-logged land and had immersed its dust-plastered body in one of the dark pools. Seemingly having neither fear nor distaste for the stinking mud his batting stirred up, or what might use that mark to cover an attack. That mark. I don't know, mark. Sharing the lizardman's fearlessness, Afrita flew ahead to dip, flutter, pursue, and swallow insects whirring in the air. Yet, as the land grew clearer and clearer to their sight in the morning, the rest of the party drew closer together, as if they sought to position themselves in defense against lurking danger. Though the illusionist had flitted above the swamplands in the night, as if provided with a firm rod for her feet, Milo could not now understand how she had been able to do that. The clumps of vegetation were scattered, broken apart by floods of mud, which heaved and shot up small brown-black bits as if they were pots boiling. Their company had fashioned the dust shoes, which had given them a measure of mobility across the sea, but those would not serve them here. There was no steady footing. Yult blew, shoved mud from his limbs with the edge of one hand. With the other he grasped a bloated, pale greenish body from which he had already torn so much of the flesh that Milo could not be sure what form it had originally. Chewing this as if it were the finest delicacy offered at some high banquet, the lizardman teetered from one foot to another, facing inward toward the hidden heart of this waterlogged, unnatural country. The Quag country was largely hidden, a mist drifted upward, steaming as might the fumes from the bubbling mud pots. They could no longer sight some of the ponds or one end of what might be a lake. Fingers of fog reached outward toward the partition between dust and mud. If the swampland had seemed nigh impossible to penetrate before the clouding of the land in a shroud that grew thicker and thicker, blotting out one clump here, a stretch of uneasy mud or pool there, now they dared not consider a single forward step. That creeping mist reached Gult, wreathed about his mud-streaked body. Before he was lost in it, he wheeled strode backward to the line change, where he stood facing them but making no move, to re-enter the sea of dust. One of his scaled arms moved in a loose, sweeping gesture. His snouted head turned a little, so one of the unblinking eyes might still regard the Quag. "We go!" His hissing voice pierced the continued buzz of the insects. Nahil, both hands clasped on the shaft of his axe, shook his head. "I am no mud sulker, skilled man. One step, two, and I will be meat for the bog. Show me how we can move across those mud traps." "That states it for us all," Wymark said. "What do we do, comrades of necessity? Is there any among us who knows a spell to grow wings, perhaps? Or one that will at least temporarily dry us a path through the murk? What of your ring, swordsman? Your map ring? What does it point as a way ahead?" He looked to Milo. The green stone had no life to illuminate those red veins. It remained as lifeless as the film of dust lying over it and all the swordsman's skin. Milo studied the rolls of mist and knew that Nail was right. The nature of this land defeated them. "Make road!" Gult's head swung fully back in their direction once again. "With what?" Evilly asked. She had not spoken since Milo had told his tale of the illusionist. He had marked also that she deliberately kept as far from him as she could during their short rest before the coming of light, sitting herself at the other end of their company with Nail, Wymark, and the elf between them. Did she, Milo wondered, now with an awakening of irritation, think that he held her accountable for the trick of spell-weaving? Surely the girl could not be so much a fool as to believe that. Divine held up his hand for silence before he spoke directly to the lizardman. You have some plan, some knowledge that is not ours then, Gult? There could be no chance of expression on the so alien face, nor did Gult directly answer the question of the cleric. Instead, he croaked a word that carried the weight of a direct order. Wait! Without lingering for any reply or protest from the others, the lizardman strode back into the quag with a confidence that certainly the rest of the party lacked. Mists closed about him, so he vanished nearly at once. In turn, they drew forward to the line between sea and quagmire. This closed the unlikeliness of finding any path over or through was even more evident. Divine addressed Milo. The illusionist vanished here, over it, or at least the light of her moon disk did. Could be another of her illusions, to make you believe so, Wymark pointed out. The elf and the cleric nodded, as if in agreement to that. Then where did she go? Returned Milo. If she ever was, Evely spoke, not to him, but as if voicing some inner thought aloud. She was there. I laid a hand on her. Milo curbed anger arising from both her tone and words. Yes, now the Divine nodded once more. Once the spell is broken, she could not summon it again easily, but another spell? He allowed his sentence to trail away. Nail went down on one knee, his attention plainly not for his companions, but for something he had sighted on the ground before him. Now reached over that dividing line and poked at a straggly, calf-high bush. From the mass of intertwined twigs, he freed a strip of material, jerking it back. Someone passed here, leaving a marker, he said. This was not so twisted by chance. What he held was a scrap of material, yellow and dingy, about the length of 2 fingers. Cloak lining. With his steel gripped in one hand, Nail used his axe with the other, sliding that weapon forward to rest momentarily on the earth beside the bush. The weight of the double-headed blade sunk it into the bare spot as soon as it rested there. Hurriedly, he snatched it back again. If it marked anything, the berserker commented, it must be not to enter here, but if it was set to ward off, then there is some place that is safe. And that may look enough like this spot, Ingrid cut in, weaving that what they could see in spite of the mist with a tracker's eyes, to mislead those who will travel here. Or else, Wymark added wryly, to play a double game and make us believe just what you have now said. Wizards' minds are devious, Alf. Such a double-set trap might well be what we have here. Something moving, Evely cried out, pointing into the swirling mist. Milo noted that he was not the only one to draw still at her warning, but the figure that came toward them at a running pace turned out to be Gult. A Gult laden with great rolls of brilliant, acid green under each arm. One of these it dropped so it flipped open of its own accord, lying directly above the spot Nail had tested with the weight of his axe. It was wider than that axe and its shaft, round in shape. A mighty leaf, rubbery twig, now rested on the treacherous surface as if it had no weight at all. Come! Gult did not even look up to see if they obeyed his summons. He was too busy laying down the rest of his load, disappearing into the mist again as he put one leaf next to the other to form a path. Nail shook his head. Does the scale one think we shall trust such a device? He demanded. How he managed to keep from thinking it's some magic of his own people. We have it, nor can a leaf give it to us. Gult did not return, though they watched for him. It was the elf who pushed past Nail and knelt to stretch out his bow, prodding at the surface of the leaf with the tip. It does not sink, he observed. Ha, Elfkind, what use your bow, even though you put muscle to your testing? Niall inquired. I guess the full weight of one of us, even that of the battle made here, will force it down. Will it? Evilly gave a short spring that carried her over the dividing line to stand balanced on the leaf. It bobbed a little as she landed upon it, but there was no breaking of its surface, nor did it sink into the mud it covered. Before Milo could protest, she moved onto the second leaf, where the mist began to swirl. Her folly was reckless. Still, she had proven that in part Gult was right. What knowledge of strange life or alien sorcery the lizardman had, it would seem that in the quagmire it was of use. Ingrid went next. He was slight of body, as were all his race, yet it was true that he must weigh more than the girl, in spite of her armor and weapons, and the pack she had slung over her shoulder before she made that reckless gesture. As he, in turn, steadied himself on the leaf, he looked over his shoulder. "It is firm," he reported, before he moved on, to be hidden in the mist as evilly had vanished. Divdine drew his robe closer about him, perhaps to guard against the tangled bush, stepping boldly out and away. He was gone as if walking on a strong-based bridge. Wymark shrugged. "Well enough. I hope that the harvest of leaves will hold," he remarked, ready to take the stride that would set him on Divdine's heels. Then Milo and Niall stood alone. Plainly the berserker mistrusted the green support. Of them all he carried the most weight, not only in bone and flesh, but also in his axe, pack, and armor. He shifted from one foot to the other, scowling, his narrowed gaze on the leaf. Finally, as the bard had done, he shrugged. "What will be, will be. If it is the fate set on me to smother his stinking mud, then how can I escape it?" He could have been marching to some battle where the odds were hopelessly against him. Milo took off his cloak, rolling it into a very rogue excuse for a rope. "Take this." I flapped one hand into Niall's reach. "It may not serve, but at least it will give you a better chance." Privately, he thought Niall was entirely right in mistrusting Gult's strange breach. Whether he could pull Niall out of danger if the leaf gave way beneath the berserker, he also had his doubts, but this was the best aid he could offer. From the quirk of the berserker's lips, Milo believed that Niall agreed with every unvoiced doubt, yet he accepted the hand of the cloak as he went forward, bringing both feet firmly together on the surface of the leaf. The green surface did tilt a fraction, bulging downward immediately under Niall's feet, yet it held, with no further sinking, as the heavy man readied his balance to take a second stride. Then he was gone, still on his feet, and the cloak pulled in Milo's hold. Gritting his teeth and trying not to think of what might happen if the leaf, which must have been badly tried by the passing of the others, gave out under him, the swordsman stepped cautiously onto its surface. It did shift under his boots, moving as might a soft surface. Still, it did not sink, and he braved the queasy uneasiness that shifting aroused in him. Now the cloak tie with Niall was broken, the other hand loose, so he drew it to him. Apparently the berserker had been so encouraged that he felt no need of such doubtful support. Milo moved, standing now on the second leaf, the mist hiding from him all but a fraction of the one head. He waited a second or two longer, making as sure as he could that Niall had progressed beyond. These leaves, by some miracle, might take the weight of one alone, but Milo had no mind to try their togetherness with both him and Niall striving to balance together. He moved slowly and carefully, took no straight, for the leaves had been laid down to skirt most of the open pools. Thus sometimes in the mist that so distorted and hid the rest of the quagmire, the swordsman felt as if he had doubled back in a time-consuming fashion. "Wait!" The warming out of the mist stopped him as he gathered himself for a small leap to carry him over a pool to a leaf lying beyond. It was harder to force himself to stand there, listening, than to keep on the move from one leaf to another. Now the insects, which he had tired to ignore in his concentration upon his footing, were a torment as they beat and stung at his waiting swollen flesh. Out of the mark of the pool something raised a clawed, scaled paw, caught the edge of the leaf, a second paw joined it. Between them appeared a frog-like head, but no frog of Milo's knowledge showed fangs pointed and threatening. The thing was the size of a small dog or cat, and he was not alone. Another paw reached for support some distance away. Milo's sword slid delicately out of its sheath. He continued to mistrust the result of any sudden movement. The first of the frog things was on the edge of the leaf, fully clear of the water, its head held at an angle so that the glitter of its eyes reached his own face. Milo struck as he might spear a fish. The sword point went into the thing's bloated body. It gave a sound more scream than croak, as he flung away from him with a sharp twist of his blade, not waiting to see it sink back into the water before he slashed down at the other. More clawed paws were showing along the leaf side. The leaf quivered under him. He killed the second of the creatures, now no more climbed from the pool. Instead, those paws, and there were more of them than he could stop to count, fastened on the leaf, forcing it aside downwards. So the things had intelligence of a sort. They were united in an attempt to upset him. Once in the pool, small as they were, he would be at their mercy. Moving as swiftly as he could, Milo slashed and slashed again. Paws were cut from spindly legs, yet others arose as the mutilated enemy sank out of sight. He was forced to his knees by the continuous shaking of the leaf, and it was slowly but inevitably sinking at the side where the frog things congregate. Milo could not move from where he already crouched, lest his own weight add to the efforts of the frog things. But he defended this shaky perch with all the skill he knew. On! The call out of the fog reached him dimly. He was far more aware of his own struggle. He allowed one glance toward the next leaf. There were none of the frog things waiting there, but to reach it meant a leap, and that from the unsteady leaf. Now they were no longer striving to upset him. Instead, with those turned paws and ferrous with their teeth, they ripped away at the leaf itself, tearing it into strings of pale green pulp. And they no longer climbed high enough for him to get at them. He must move, and now! Milo gathered himself together, and not daring to pause any longer, one tear in the leaf had already nearly reached him, he made the crossing. His horse perhaps added to the impact of his landing, for he lost his footing as the leaf moved under him. The toe of one boot projected back over the pond. As he fought to regain his balance, drawing in his leg, he saw one of the frog creatures had its teeth embedded in the metal reinforced leather of the boots. With a small surge of something close to panic, the swordsman struck out with his mailed fist, for he had sheathed his sword and hit the thing full on. The fat body smashed under his blow. However, the jaws did not open, keeping fast their hold. Milo had to slash and slash again with his dagger, his hands shaking with a horror he could not control. Though he had so rid himself of the flattened body and of most of the head, he could not even then lose the jaws. Thus he carried with him as he hurried on, moving from one leaf to the next. Voices sounded ahead. There was a calling of his name. He took a deep breath and answered, hoping that his present state of mind could not be deduced from his tone. Then, as his pulse slowed and he mastered the sickness that threatened each time he glanced at the thing deep set in his boot, he had another fleeting thought. The bracelet! Milo swung up his arm, almost believing that he must have lost it. There had not been the slightest warning of any peril ahead, such as he had come to rely upon. The dice were fixed. He prodded one with a finger He prodded one with a finger, unmovable. Did that mean that they had lost the one small advantage they might have in any struggle to come? Leaf by leaf he won ahead. The mist did not thin. All he could see was what lay immediately around him. Luckily, though he skirted 2 more pools, neither had to be directly crossed. "Take care!" Another warning from the curtain of mist. "Be right as you come!" The leaf before him was set straight. Milo hesitated, looked to the bracelet. It remained uncommunicative. Voices? Illusions? If he bore right as ordered, would such a shift take him directly into disaster? "Nail!" he called back, determined for identification before he obeyed. "Why, Mark?" the answer came. The mist, Milo decided, played tricks with normal tones. It could have been anyone who mouthed that name. Sword in hand, Milo tittered back and forth. He must change it. To do otherwise might not only endanger him, but one of the others. He moved on, across the leaf and to the right, skirting the very edge of it and causing it to tilt. So he came through the mist to where figures stood, half unseen. There was a line of leaves laid out here, so each one had a firm platform of his own. Before them stretched a wide spread of water. Perhaps this was the lake they had been able to view in the first great time of light before the mist gathered. As he moved up, even with the others, he saw that his neighbor was indeed the bard. What do we wait for? Wymark made a gesture to the sweep of dark water. For a bridge, apparently, or something of that sort. I could wish that we did it in a less populated place. He slapped it at his face and neck, hardly disturbing the insects that buzzed about him in a cloud of constant assault. Guilt? The lizardman had solved one problem for them. Would he have an answer for this also? It was gone when we reached here, but we are not the first to come this way. Look! It could only be half seen in the mist, but what the bard pointed to was a post made of a tree trunk, its bark still on, and overlaid with a thick resinous gum. Coated in it were layers of the insect, so that it was coated above the waterline with the dead and the still struggling living. But on each side of it, well up above the water, were 2 hopes of metal, dulled and rusty, standing away from the wood. Mooring of a sort. Milo was sure he was right, and if something had been moored here in the past. Still, that did not signify that any such transportation would be available to them. "Something's coming!" Nail, beyond Weimar, gave them warning. Milo could hear nothing but the noise of the insects which, now that he was not occupied with leaf crossing, was maddening. Out of the mist a dark shadow glided across the surface of the lake, hidden straight for them. Afrita, who had been in her usual riding place on Nail's shoulder, darted out to meet that craft. It was a queer sort of a boat, and one that Milo could not accept at first as being any possible transportation at all. It looked far more as if a mass of reeds had been uprooted and was drifting toward them. Still, nomad would move with such purpose, and this moved steadily, if slowly, plainly aimed at the shore at their feet. As it at last nudged the mud, Milo could see that the raft was indeed fashioned of reeds, at least on the surface. They had been torn from their rooting, forced into bundles, and tied together with cords made of their own materials. The bundles did not dip deeply in the water. Plainly they rested on another base. Now, below the front edge of this unwieldy platform of vegetation, it did not even promise the stability of a raft. Something rose to the surface. Guilt drew himself up and collected from among the reed bundles his sword belt with its weapon. "Come!" In the mist his voice took on some of the croaking intonation of the frog things. To underline this invitation order, he gestured them forward. Then were extra rows of the reed bundles forming a raised edging about the platform. But 7 of them on that, Milo, for one, saw little hope. Yet Tivoli was not going to lead this time. Since by chance it was the closest, the swordsman jumped, landing on the other side of the low barrier. The raft did bob about, but it remained remarkably buoyant. Milo clambered hastily to join Gult. Perhaps with their weight on the other side to balance, the others would have less trouble embarking. So, one by one they followed Milo's lead, Nail coming last. The raft did sink a little then. Some of the water forced their runnels through the raised edge. At Gult's order, they spaced themselves across the surface in a pattern the lizardman indicated, which they deduced had something to do with maintaining his floating ability. Then, dropping his sword belt once more, Gult slid easily into the water and the raft slowly moved out from the shore. Milo turned his head, while Mark lay an arm's distance away. "He can't be towing us, not alone," the swordsman protested. Magic he could swallow, but this was no magic he knew. "He is not," in Greek instead of the bard answered. "Direction he gives, but to others. The skilled ones have their own friends and helpers on those are bomb of swarms. Gult has found here such to answer his call. They swim below the surface as the horses of the land pull a cart. This will bring us across the water." Cat says. Okay. Their journey was a slow one. Nope. And it was as the mist gathered around them, and they could no longer see the shore from which they came, a blind voyage. Nor was there any sign of what or who drew them on. Milo rose cautiously to his knees, once to peer over the barrier. He saw lines of braided reeds showing now and again at the meeting of raft and water. They were drowned out, save for those and the emergence of Gult at intervals, his head rising so he might check on the raft. There was no proof they were not alone. End of chapter 16. Next time we end our book, the last 18 pages, chapter 17 and chapter 18. Now I have a cat to consider. Sorry. Okay, I can end the live. No? Yes? Okay, for today is all. We are almost at the end, so Wednesday, I think, we end the Quag Keep. After that, I have an idea of the next books. Not 1, not 2, not 2, but 4 books. Still in Grey Oak, but we leave from the novels and we go in the world of the game books, because long time ago Gygax wrote 4 game books set in Grey Oak. So for today we ended it here. I give you have a nice day, and we're gonna listen, see, but anyway, anytime. Wednesday. Have a good night, or have a good evening, or a good day, or have a good something.